Hello, I'm Alison from guidesforbrides.co.uk, and no surprise, tonight's update is looking at the different tiers across different parts of England and how that is going to impact on weddings. So this is from the 2nd of December. The different tiers for different areas will be being reviewed every 2 weeks. So the next update will be on the 16th of December. So from the 2nd of December up until the 16th, the tiers that are in place at the moment and are on the government website that does still keep crashing will apply. So unless you are in Cornwall, the Isle of Wight or the Isles of Scilly, you will be either in Tier 2 or Tier 3. And where the problems seem to be occurring is with the issue of travel in between those two areas. So obviously weddings can go ahead in all areas, so Tier 1, 2 and 3 across England, weddings with up to 15 can go ahead. However, the reception can't go ahead in Tier 3 areas. So that is just the legal part of the wedding, or the wedding part, the ceremony, not the reception. So a little bit of a difference between weddings and funerals there, where funerals, there can be something after the funeral for up to 15, weddings, just the wedding. And if you're thinking about doing anything at all after the wedding, just remember the rule of 6 applies if you're outdoors in a public place. So in theory, 6 people could get together after the wedding in a public place, but absolutely not in a garden. It is single households only. And Beck's saying, shame that they're not increasing numbers for Tier 1, maybe in the future. Yes, it would be really nice to see these sort of gradual changes, although we're also really aware that it will cause huge complications, which is what we'll come on to now, because where the big issue is if you are in Tier 3, you're covered by travel restrictions, which means that if you're due to be getting married in a Tier 1 or 2 tier area, even though the wedding can go ahead, you shouldn't be travelling in order to go to that wedding. So whether you're going as a guest or it's your own wedding, travel restrictions prevent you from going. So just to reiterate the wording from the government website, because this has been the question that's been coming up a lot today, the guidance is that you should avoid travelling to other parts of the UK other than for work, education, youth services, medical treatments and caring responsibilities. So whereas previously some of the regulations, I'm not sure if it was for England, it may just have been for Wales, covered being able to travel in order to attend a wedding. That is not covered in these guidance. It is not one of the reasons you should be travelling. And one of the perhaps really important things to bear in mind is if you are in a Tier 3 area, it is because you are considered to be a higher risk of catching and therefore transmitting coronavirus. You don't want to be taking that into another area. You certainly do not want to be taking that into a wedding venue and potentially infecting other guests, the venue staff or anyone else involved in that wedding. We need to keep weddings safe. So you can really understand the importance of this rule. It's incredibly hard, and it does mean that people will be going ahead perhaps without guests, and might answer Bex's question about whether Tier 1 could have different regulations. Yes, it would be great, but just imagine how much harder and more expensive that's going to be if you've got a wedding for 50 guests that's having to be cancelled because the bride and groom can't get there. Makes it so much harder. And although the majority of couples do get married within 30 miles of their home address, there's still a lot of couples that don't, or go just across a border, so that would be problematic. So Rachel, can I travel from one county in a Tier 3 to another in Tier 3? No, you should be avoiding travel. So avoiding travel to other parts. It's not just avoiding travel from one tier to another. It's avoiding travel. So I would say that probably sits exactly the same. Certainly, in my opinion, this is about trying to reduce risk and show that weddings can take place responsibly, so that we can be allowed to open fully after April. So the other bits that might be helpful are close contact services opening up again, so you can look and feel good for your wedding day. So that is hair, makeup, nails, massage, tanning, tattoos, spas. All of those will be opening right the way across, and retail, including things like car boot sales, doesn't allow for wedding fairs yet, and the business events that are now starting to open up again, that doesn't allow for wedding fairs. This is business events as opposed to consumer events at the moment. Obviously certain performances and so on are allowed in tier 1 and 2, slightly to our frustration, the amount that those have opened up, but it does start paving the way for more to be happening. So Vicky has said she has postponed from April to October. Third date is April 2021, praying for a more normal day. We are absolutely with you, and one of the things, and yes, again Lucy, again an April date. How do we know how many numbers to plan for April for catering? Absolutely, the industry is working really, really hard on this. It was a clear message in September that the current guidance was likely to be in place for 6 months. And that takes us towards the very end of March. And everything that we're hearing from the government is very much that they are looking for more normality from Easter. Now, Easter is at the very, very beginning of April. So looking for normality there, we'd like to feel that that much larger weddings can be part of that. Obviously, vaccines are going to make a very big difference. And hopefully rapid testing, and everything that the venues have done to make their venues COVID secure. So if you do have a wedding in April, assume that your wedding can go ahead, and assume that you will be able to do a reasonable amount at that wedding. Now, we don't know the details yet, it is too early. And it may well be dictated over the next few weeks by how these measures start shaping up, and if the rate comes down and so on. But we can assume there will be very big differences between weddings going up to the end of March and weddings from the end of March onwards. If your wedding is April onwards, please still be there when these venues open and these suppliers are all ready to come back to work, because we are all working phenomenally hard to make sure that can happen for you, doing everything we can to put everything in place for April. So we do need to make sure there's some weddings there, and what we know is people are going to be so pleased to be out celebrating those weddings. Those couples that have been bold enough to stick with an April date really will be rewarded. Everyone's going to be so pleased to be at those weddings. So do stick with it. If there is some logistical reason you absolutely cannot go ahead with your April wedding, please be aware it's not a frustrated contract. You can't just change the date, ask for an alternative date, ask to cancel and expect a refund. Whatever the terms and conditions were for that original booking will apply. So the chances are you'll lose your deposit. There may be additional costs as well. So please bear that in mind. It's not a frustrated contract. It will be bound by terms and conditions. So the fact that venues and suppliers have been brilliant on the whole about allowing for postponements, cancellations, they just ignored the terms and conditions that usually would prevent that. They're helping couples in whatever way they can. There has to be a point at which they say, well, hang on a minute, this wedding can take place as far as everyone is concerned. So hopefully that helps with April. So just to reiterate, from the point of view of the 3 different tiers, Tier 3 should not be travelling out of their area. So that is going to cause some disruption from the point of view of weddings. Speak to the venue. They will be aware of it. They will have prepared for this. They will know that it was a possibility. They will have a contingency plan. They will want to keep their staff safe. They will want to keep the suppliers involved in your wedding safe. Otherwise, anyone that has now been hearing about all these amazing intimate weddings with 15 guests there, please go ahead, have that sequel wedding. So have your small ceremony and a small reception, just close family and friends now. You will love it. It's a lovely way to support your venue as well. Bear in mind, if you're in a tier 3 area, your venue might not be able to open if it is just the ceremony. So just bear that in mind. It's very expensive at this time of year to open up a venue. So please do talk to them about that in case that is a concern for them. We don't want to be putting any of these venues under more financial strain, and they really won't want to let you down. So just have that conversation. But otherwise, please do go ahead with that lovely intimate wedding, and then you can look forward to a full celebration some point next year with all of your family and friends there, and without needing to worry about having to get a registrar there. You can then have a ceremony outside. You can choose what you want to do because it won't be a legal ceremony. You can do it exactly as you want. So I'm just going to have a look at a few more of these questions, hopefully answer any other of these questions that we haven't already covered. So getting married in mid-March, what do you think for 30 people? Mid-March is before that 6-month cut-off date, so at the moment we're not sure. There's not a huge difference from the point of view of 15 and 30 from the point of view of making it easier or more viable for venues and suppliers. So it's really just a matter of having a few extra in, but what we do know is when it was 30, it was a lot harder to make sure everyone followed social distancing rules. So it probably depends on the progress with the vaccine and rapid testing. So I think I would probably be saying to you, it's Sean asking about that one, I would keep a very close eye on vaccine and speak to your venue about when the latest date is that you can make that call. I mean, they'll have to make the call anyway, so but you probably want to know from the point of view of your guest list. So can close contact services be done when not in a salon? Yes, I believe so, because the rules are that you can go to work if your work can't be done. You know, if you need to go elsewhere for work, then I believe that should be fine. So I'm sure somebody will correct me if that's not the case, but I believe that is fine. So particularly if it's a COVID secure environment, just make sure that you're not. I think a lot of beauticians and hairdressers would be probably quite uncomfortable coming into somebody's house at the moment. But if you're talking about in the hotel, getting ready there beforehand, I would say that should be absolutely fine. If it is somebody that works from a salon, I would definitely be going to the salon for that, the treatment or the hair up or whatever you're doing. If they usually work from home and would usually come to you, speak to them, find out what they're comfortable with. They are allowed to go out to work, so that should be okay. But otherwise, if you can be in your venue, that would be much more comfortable. Can I have a sit-down meal in a pub after our ceremony? Well, boo hiss, we would much rather you were in a wedding venue. They really need your support. They didn't have the Eat Out to help out in the summer. So they really are the ones that really, really do need our support right now. But Victoria, the answer there is yes, you can, unless you're in tier 2, so that's fine. But the pub can only open for you for that, is my understanding. Now, unless that has changed, and I can't find anything that suggests that has changed. So if they have a completely separate dining room, that would be fine. But because the limit is 15, and we have to be really, really careful that we are absolutely demonstrating that we're doing this right, we can't run the risk that there is a suggestion that in addition to the 15 in your wedding party, there were then another 6 on the table over there and another 6 on the table over there, and so on. So really important that we are all absolutely following the rules, and really important that pubs and restaurants are seen to be following these rules as well. So if the pub is prepared to close for you, or the restaurant's prepared to close for you, so it's just the 15 of you in there, great, but they would probably prefer to have the income from being able to open for larger numbers. So hopefully that helps from that point of view. So obviously the exemption of 15 is very specifically for a wedding. So otherwise you would just be at tables of 6 in that pub. So Easter, Debbie, Easter weekend, really hoping for 30. So yes, that's into April, so fingers crossed. Is it 15 guests, or is that the number including me and my soon-to-be husband, Kerry? It is 15 in total. So So that will include the two of you, but it doesn't include suppliers. The reason it doesn't include the suppliers is because they will be kept socially distant and away from you. So there's no reason to include those in that number of 15. I'm really, really glad that it gives you hope. So Alison Louise Bridal, yeah, really good to see bridal shops being able to reopen. We were quite worried that that would vary from tier to tier, and that would have been really, really hard on those in tier 3 areas. It just starts feeling a little unfair then that brides from their area would have been travelling to other areas, potentially, tempted to abandon their own boutiques that they were planning on using. Getting married so this is the end of April, 100 plus guests, Alex. I certainly wouldn't give up on that. The hope of a vaccine, that is going to make a big difference, and the phase 1 of the vaccine is going to be for right the way down to people 50 plus. So if you think about all of those potentially vulnerable, that includes generally in most weddings the parents' generation. So it's actually a lot of the guests should have been vaccinated. It's likely to only be the bride and groom and their friends and siblings, rather than the aunts, uncles, grandparents, parents, godparents, and so on. That won't have been vaccinated. So all of that older generation hopefully will have been vaccinated, and hopefully that will make a really big difference. We are working so hard on doing everything we can to make sure that from the beginning of April or from the end of March, these much more normal weddings can take place. And we do have a lot of promise of more normality from Boris from Easter onwards. So I would certainly hope that these important life events form part of that. So Jane, due to get married 21st December in tier 3, I can't get ready with those from other households, can I? No, you can't, I'm sorry. So it is obviously very, very restricted in tier 3. I know it's really hard for you, but it's just a relief that these weddings could go ahead, because that was really painful seeing the last few weeks only deathbed weddings allowed, and that's a really difficult situation for couples to be in. So it's not going to be quite the same, Jane, as you might have hoped, but you can still you can be getting ready with somebody from your own household. I don't know if the slightly different bubble arrangements make a difference with those with a child aged under 1 can form a bubble with somebody else, whether that helps at all. Perhaps if you've got a bridesmaid with a baby, that may help. But it is really a matter of getting the legal wedding done, and all of the celebration later. Doesn't mean you're not wanting to look fabulous on your wedding day, and I know it's really difficult not being able to mix with another household, because anyone that has tried to put their own wedding dress on will know how difficult that is without help. But perhaps speak to your venue. I think that would probably be the best advice here. Speak to your venue, see if you can go in there. They are allowed to work, and helping you get into your wedding dress will be part of their work. Again, if you can use a hairdresser or a beautician that can then help you get ready, a wedding planner, any of those will help you get ready, and they'll be delighted to be working as well. So hopefully that helps. 1st of, April Maria, yes, 1st of November 2021. Yes, I would hope it would be okay by then. I would hope that by then, gosh, if we're not all vaccinated and feeling an awful lot differently, it would be really, really sad. So no, I think for November, I would really crack on with plans, and I would start cracking on with them quite fast, because what we know is September dates are almost chock-a-block. It's really, really hard to find a date in September for anything now. September 2021 has become the time to get married next year, and that is going to start flowing into October and November, and you'll find all of the services that can only do one wedding, so things like photographers, videographers, will not have the availability if you leave it much longer. Certainly if you're already engaged and you're already planning, and especially if you've already got that date, make sure you book all of those suppliers now before 26th of December, because that's when we suddenly see a huge number of newly proposed, newly engaged couples suddenly appearing, inquiring and booking these suppliers. So if you're already in that process, get everything across the line now. If you are worried about booking suppliers, have a look on our blog or have a look on the video we did earlier today. We've got a blog post about the tricky questions that you could and should be asking your suppliers if you're at all anxious about paying deposits at the moment. So that should help with all of those questions. Yes, Jane is saying, venue has said we can cancel, postpone right up to the government review of tiers. The suppliers said they can't wait that long. Gosh, that is difficult. And I mean, most suppliers should be aware that if government restrictions prevent the wedding from taking place, that it becomes a frustrated contract. Normal terms and conditions don't apply. The difficulty is, because the CMA guidance didn't really make any sense to anyone, brides or businesses, nobody really knows what would happen now in the case of a frustrated contract. So what would the refund be? We know in some cases, for example, for venues, there has been the figure of 37.2% could be charged, but that was in a particular situation for a particular venue. It might be more for others, it might be less. The important thing is we don't want to get into that cancellation situation. So, and the suppliers would be in the same boat. They're not going to want anyone to certainly cancel. I mean, I think when you've gone through everything to plan a wedding, why would you be cancelling? But to postpone, I think it's just a matter of really working with those suppliers, explaining that you're going to wait as late as possible so that it can go ahead if at all possible. I can't quite understand why a supplier wouldn't want the hope of a wedding going ahead now, unless they're having to buy ingredients, buy flowers, they've got other possible commitments. So perhaps just have that conversation with them and hopefully you can resolve that one. Emily, this is our worst fear, end of March 27th, but in a tier 3 area. So 2 bits to that question. 27th, does that still fall within the 6 months that Boris was talking about? We don't know. What we know is that he doesn't say, in most cases, that from the 1st of that month. It's strange dates. It's this is from the from the 2nd of December onwards. So taking effect from then onwards, for example. So we have no reason to think that the current 6 months will end miraculously on the 31st. It's more likely to be the 27th or 28th. You may be the very first wedding that takes place if you can hold your nerve. So hold your nerve if you can on that date, because as we get closer, as we know, we will have more news. The fact that you're in a tier 3 area now, don't worry about that. They're being reviewed every 2 weeks. So the next review will be on the 16th of December. And you'll be able to have a look. There's very clear guidance on the government website about what sort of things will dictate which tier you go into. So Molly, again, 27th of March. So let's keep fingers crossed that we get that clarification. It's something we were discussing, funnily enough, earlier on today. That is the sort of thing that would be really, really useful, just to have these little issues clarified. Getting ready in tier 2, getting married in tier 3. Can all the bridesmaids get ready together? So if the bridesmaids are in tier 2, getting married in tier 2, getting ready in tier 2, then that is all activity happening in tier 2. So that should be fine. But obviously they can't get ready in the tier 3 venue or in a tier 3 area altogether. So hopefully that helps. Can you travel from a tier 2 to a tier 3? Yes. I'm not sure it's hugely recommended, but I'm not sure there's anything actually preventing that. I might be wrong. I will double check on that one, and I'm going to answer that one as soon as we come off this video. because that covers makeup artists and hairdressers, can work. So I think you're more likely to be able to, if you're doing it for work, you can travel in and out of tier 3 areas for work. So I'd say as a hairdresser, I would say you can. Just remember that the whole reason for these different tiers is to reduce the risk to you and everyone that you're around. Due to get married 1st of May, are we looking at 15 still? I certainly hope not. Gosh, that would be unthinkable. No, I would be incredibly surprised. 30th of May, 40 to 50 guests, think it will go ahead? Yep, I would be completely confident. I'm guessing I can still have my photos taken after our ceremony in tier 3, even though we can't have a reception. Technically you can't, because that's not the wedding that's taking place at that point. That is a photo shoot. And how far do you take that? Do you then start putting a glass of champagne in people's hands for the shoot, or you know, throwing confetti, and all of these things that start to become higher risk? So what we noticed previously is it did seem to come down to individual venues, the registrars and the photographers. It was one of the areas where there seemed to be a little bit of flexibility. People were sensible, if they were socially distant, if it was outside. Now, it's going to be quite cold outside. You might not have the best weather. What you don't want is people all huddling together under umbrellas or huddling together to get onto the one bit of shelter. So just bear that in mind. It might not be that easy to get the photos that you would really want, but I'm sure your photographer will be able to make sure they get a good record of the day, of the really important shots. Any other fingers crossed for lots of wedding choreography? Yes, absolutely. Once we can get these dance floors reopening, and I had a lovely comment from Brian Mole earlier on. So he works with a lot of DJs through one of the associations, and we were having a bit of a debate about all of the things that we could be doing to make dance floors safer. And his great idea that really made me smile was employ a bad DJ, because then no one will get on the dance floor. So let's hope that that's not going to be the solution. Tier 1 due to marry in April, so Kelly, you should be probably quite relaxed about that. And Sally Ann, sorry, I've lost faith. We get the rule, one rule 1 week, and then they change. And this is a really difficult one, because we're wanting things to progress, we're wanting to see change, and we have sort of half of the couples we speak to are saying it would be great if this changes, and half of the couples are saying but it keeps changing. So we're never going to have everyone happy with everything. I think it's nice that the government are doing what they can to allow as many weddings to take place as they possibly can, and allowing as much as can happen while it's safe. What we need to make sure is that we keep it as safe as possible, and we're responsible through all of this. So Eileen, postponed date of 20th of February. I think I would plan on the sort of wedding that everyone's planning at the moment. Things might have improved a lot in February if the vaccine is rolled out in the way they're hoping. Things may have changed by then. But otherwise, please do plan for one of these lovely intimate wedding ceremonies. Everyone that is having these smaller ceremonies and these smaller receptions say they are so beautiful. And you know, the worry is that this is going to become the trend, because people have really enjoyed these smaller, much smaller ceremony. Will a 7-month-old baby count in the 15 numbers? Yes, I believe they do. 13th of March, second time, is it going to go ahead? Depends on numbers. Certainly a small wedding I would be very confident of. Louise asking, April the 9th, do you think it'll be back to normal numbers by then? Obviously, everyone in the industry is pushing towards the idea of opening dependent on capacity. The news this week on big outdoor venues and theatres and so on, 50% of capacity or a maximum number. That has been used in lots of different countries and seems to be a very sensible approach, and I think one that a lot would be very comfortable with. So we're certainly hoping, and that might help those with weddings in April, for example, to just start thinking about their numbers based on what would happen if that was the limitation. How many guests would you be able to fit in if it was 50% of the normal capacity? Please don't flood your venues with that question. It's quite difficult for them to work out. It's not something that they will just have that number. They will probably have, you will know the number that they would be able to have there for a civil ceremony or for a reception. Just take that number, but that is not necessarily going to be the exact number once you start putting social distancing in place. So 24th of April, Lucy-Anne, holding out for bigger numbers. That's the right way to do it. Can you still have videographers and photographers in the church in a tier 3? Yes, you can. They are there for work, so that is absolutely fine. They will be keeping socially distant, away from everyone. They should be able to come in from other areas if that is what they choose to do, but equally they may feel uncomfortable, and that's something that's really important for us all to absolutely respect. If they're not comfortable in that situation, I'm sure they will have lots of colleagues that they would be able to refer you to, or do have a look. We've got a date availability checker on guidesforbrides.co.uk, so you can very quickly see who's available, or let us know and we can put a quick shout out on in the various Facebook or LinkedIn groups and find you a photographer and videographer instantly. But I think you'll find they will be absolutely fine with that scenario. And Nicola, we don't know at the moment for April, but stick with it. I'm really hoping that we'll have much more of an idea of how many guests can be involved. Hopefully soon after Christmas, when we get more news on the vaccine, we get more information on rapid testing, and everything is moving forward. So Danielle, I'm glad this has given you a glimmer of hope. I think everything is really, really looking positive. Please believe me, when we get round to the spring and weddings are back and we can get back out again properly celebrating these weddings that have been postponed time after time after time, all of this will be a dim and distant memory. So let's all hold out for that. But for now, thank you very much indeed for joining me.